In every quiet neighborhood, there's a story that was never meant to be told. Behind locked doors, laughter turned to screaming, and love turned to blood. A family slaughtered in their sleep, a son who murdered his own mother, a lover who filmed her death and smiled. These aren't horror movies. They're real. 5 true crime stories so dark, they'll stay with you long after the screen fades to black. It was an ordinary fall evening in the small farming town of Beeson, Illinois. Police walked into a house so horrifying that seasoned officers nearly vomited on the spot. 5 members of the same family had been brutally slaughtered overnight. The father, the mother, and 3 children. Only one tiny survivor was found, barely clinging to life. One of the most shocking family massacres in the state's history. What happened inside that quiet home would shake the entire community and expose a killer no one saw coming. Who was behind this nightmare? And why was he so obsessed that even innocent children weren't spared? This case would later be known as the Beeson Bloodbath. Illinois is best known for its bustling city of Chicago. Bright lights, noise, endless movement. But far from that chaos lies Beeson, surrounded by farmland and rolling hills. A place where crime is rare and people pride themselves on safety. In the late 1990s, 2 people called Beeson home. Raymond "Rick" Gee and Ruth Ann Constant. Rick was known for his dedication and strength. After his biological father was killed in Vietnam, he grew up under the care of his mother, Judy, and his stepfather, William "Fat Man" Collar. Rick worked tirelessly at his stepfather's construction business in Lincoln, saving every dollar until he could start his own company, G Construction. He bought a small ranch-style home on the outskirts of Beeson. It had a 2-car garage, a pool, and farmland where he raised chickens. Life was modest, but peaceful. To help pay off the mortgage, Rick decided to rent a room to a young woman named Ruth Ann Constant and her 2 children, 3-year-old Justina and 1-year-old Dylan. What began as a simple rental soon turned into a romance. Ruth was cheerful, caring, and adored children. Rick, hardworking and kind, was a family man at heart. In 1997, they married. Rick was 34, Ruth 27. Together, they blended their families. Rick's teenage daughter, Nicole. Ruth's children, Justina and Dylan, and eventually 3 more children followed, Austin, Jessica, and Tabitha. Life in the Gee household was busy but full of love. Rick worked long hours while Ruth cared for the kids and maintained the home. Every Sunday, they attended church. During weekdays, the children walked to the post office to catch the school bus, a 4-minute walk that became part of the town's daily rhythm. The Gee children were well known around Beeson, polite, friendly, and close-knit. The postmaster remembered them fondly, especially Dylan, the spirited middle child who often couldn't sit still. But behind the cheerful scenes, Ruth and Rick struggled with one heartbreaking challenge. Their daughter, Jessica Lynn, born with a severe neurological disorder that confined her to a wheelchair. Unable to care for her properly in Beeson, they made the painful decision to place her in a state medical facility. It was a choice that weighed heavily on them, but they did what they thought was best. Among all the children, Dylan was the one who tested their patience. Energetic and impulsive, he struggled in school. Teachers constantly sent reports about his behavior, describing him as restless and defiant. Doctors diagnosed him with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and prescribed medication, but it barely helped. His mother worried that one day his anger might spiral out of control. Even Rick confided to his own mother that if they didn't get Dylan under control, One morning, the family might not wake up. Still, despite his behavior, Dylan wasn't evil. He was a boy trying to find his place, frustrated, misunderstood, and drawn deeper into violent video games that gave him a sense of control. By 2006, the family had grown once again with the birth of baby Tabitha. Rick's eldest daughter, Nicole, had also married her childhood sweetheart, Christopher Harris. They lived nearby with their newborn daughter, Alice. The extended B family often gathered together, helping one another and sharing in small-town joys. But by 2009, Rick's construction business began to struggle. The economy was poor and jobs were scarce. Financial stress took a toll on the household, but they continued to push forward. Despite their troubles, they were still seen as one of the kindest families in Beeson, the kind you'd never imagine would face tragedy. On Monday afternoon, September 21st, 2009, a 10-year-old boy pedaled his bicycle toward the Gee home. He was excited to show his friends Austin and Dylan his new bike. As he reached the porch, something stopped him cold. The front door was ajar, the porch smeared with blood. Frozen in fear, the boy shouted for his friends. No one answered. Panicking, he jumped back on his bike and raced to Nicole's nearby house, where he found Rick's stepfather, Fat Man, and cousin Adam helping with renovations. Out of breath, the child stammered that something terrible had happened at the Gee home. Adam and Fat Man immediately dropped their tools and sped toward the house. When they arrived, Adam approached the porch and saw it for himself. The blood, the knife on the step. Fat Man tried to calm himself, suggesting maybe the family had slaughtered a chicken. But Adam knew better. He stepped over the pool of blood, pushed open the door, and flicked on the light. What he saw made his blood run cold. Lying face down in a pool of blood was Raymond Rick G., his head crushed, his body beaten beyond recognition. Adam froze in shock and stumbled backward, yelling for Fat Man to call 911. Minutes later, police cars and ambulances descended on the quiet street. Nicole arrived, confused and terrified, begging officers to tell her what was happening to her family. No one had answers yet. When law enforcement entered the home, they encountered a nightmare unlike anything they had ever seen. Blood covered the walls, floors, even the ceiling. It looked less like a home and more like a war zone. In the hallway lay 14-year-old Dylan, curled up in a fetal position, wearing only shorts. His skull had been shattered. Nearby, in the main bedroom, officers found Ruth, still in her nightgown, her head partially missing. In the bathroom was 11-year-old Austin, face down, barely recognizable. In another room, 16-year-old Justina lay across her bed, her Bible nearby, the upper part of her skull gone. The officers had seen violence before, but not like this. Then came the most haunting discovery of all. In the corner of a dark closet, barely visible beneath the shadows, was the small body of 3-year-old Tabitha. At first, they thought she was gone like the others. But then, a twitch, a faint movement of her tiny hand. She was alive. Officers immediately called for medics. One of them knelt beside the girl, gently stroking her back as she tried to breathe. Tabitha was covered in blood, her skull fractured, and one arm broken, but somehow she had survived 14 hours alone among the dead. Paramedics rushed her to an ambulance as Nicole screamed in despair, realizing that her entire family was inside that house. She wasn't allowed to go in. Officers restrained her, fearing what she might see. She was placed in the ambulance beside her baby sister, clinging to hope that at least one member of her family might live. The ambulance sped toward St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, nearly an hour away. Police cars followed closely behind. In that moment, Beeson's peace was shattered forever. News of the massacre spread quickly. Residents poured into the streets in disbelief. People who had never locked their doors now shut their windows and stayed inside. Rumors swept through the town. Who could do something like this? Some thought it was a robbery gone wrong. Others whispered about a stranger seen driving through town the night before. By evening, television crews and journalists filled Beeson's quiet roads, filming the flashing lights around the Gee home. To the outside world, it looked like a horror movie. But for Beeson's residents, it was the death of their innocence. Later that night, the coroner arrived to collect the bodies. Forensic teams carefully documented the scene. The next day, Rick's mother, Judy, was called to identify the victims. She had not yet been told what happened until her granddaughter Nicole called, sobbing, telling her the unthinkable. At the morgue, Judy was shown photographs. Rick, Ruth, Justina, Dylan, Austin, and little Tabitha, barely clinging to life. The coroner's report confirmed the brutality. Every victim had been beaten to death, not shot as initially believed. Rick suffered 39 blows, 13 to the head. Ruth, 28. Austin, 21. His skull fractured on both sides. Justina, 15. Her skull destroyed. Dylan, over 100 wounds, more than half to his head. It was a massacre. The Gee family hadn't just been killed, they'd been obliterated. By dawn, fear gripped the entire county. Beeson had never seen a crime like this. There were no gunshots, no signs of forced entry, only destruction. Who could commit such savagery, and why? Investigators began scouring the home for clues. The crime scene was sealed off as dawn broke over Beeson. Police marked every bloodstain, every shattered fragment, and every footprint. The quiet farmland community was now the center of one of Illinois' most disturbing murder cases. Outside the Gee home, officers discovered something vital, a distinct shoe print in the mud near the porch. It was clear and detailed, matching a popular brand of athletic sneaker. Whoever left it had been close enough to the house to see everything. Investigators photographed it, made a plaster cast, and carefully stored it away. That single print might be the only link to the killer. Inside, forensic teams uncovered another piece of evidence, a bloody handprint on the bathroom countertop, near where young Austin had been found. The surface was glass, smooth and difficult for prints to stick to, but the mark was unmistakable. Technicians used special powders and chemical treatments to lift it, hoping it would lead to an identity. Everywhere else, chaos reigned. Broken glass, splintered furniture, smeared blood. It was clear the killer had spent time inside, moving through each room deliberately, ensuring no one was left alive. As the first day of the investigation began, the small town was gripped by fear. Beeson had no local police department, so the Logan County Sheriff's Office and Illinois State Police took charge. Officers went door to door, interviewing neighbors and collecting any shred of information that might explain how an entire family could be wiped out overnight. No one had heard gunshots or screams. Only silence. One neighbor, however, recalled something strange. Sometime after midnight, he'd noticed a gray pickup truck driving slowly toward the Gee residence. It wasn't a familiar vehicle. The details seemed small, but investigators seized on it. They released a sketch of the truck, silver or light gray, with unusual vertical exhaust pipes protruding from the bed behind the cab. Roadblocks were set up, and officers stopped every similar truck they could find in the area. Despite the urgency, nothing matched. Whoever had been in that pickup had vanished into the night. Meanwhile, at St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, 3-year-old Tabitha fought for her life. Her skull was fractured, her arm broken, and she was slipping in and out of consciousness. Doctors weren't sure if she would survive, and if she did, whether she'd ever remember what she saw. Police stationed an officer at her hospital room 24 hours a day. Tabitha wasn't just a victim, she was the only living witness. If she woke up and could speak, she might hold the key to everything. At her bedside sat her older sister, Nicole Gee, and Nicole's husband, Christopher Harris. Nicole was shattered. She'd lost nearly everyone she loved in a single night. Harris stayed by her side, comforting her, changing shifts with her mother Judy, and promising that whoever had done this would pay. To everyone around them, he appeared to be the perfect grieving husband. Detectives began questioning everyone connected to the family. Nicole was interviewed first. Despite her emotional state, she tried to remember every detail of the last few days. She told investigators her parents were loving, peaceful people. She couldn't think of anyone who wanted to hurt them. The detectives asked about possible grudges, business disputes, or personal conflicts, but there were none. Rick had a few unpaid jobs due to the economy, but nothing violent or suspicious. Ruth had no enemies, no secret life. It didn't make sense. Next, they turned to Christopher Harris. He had known the Gee family for years, since he was a teenager dating Nicole. He told detectives that on the night of the murders, he'd been out with his younger brother Jason Harris at a bar in Lincoln, about 20 minutes away. They'd been drinking, hanging out, then went home. He insisted he knew nothing about what happened until the next day. Police made notes. Harris seemed calm and cooperative. No visible scratches, no cuts, no bruises. Nothing to suggest he'd been involved in a violent struggle. On paper, his alibi looked solid. 2 days passed, then 3. The press surrounded the Logan County courthouse. Reporters demanded answers. How could 6 people, 5 dead, 1 clinging to life, be attacked without anyone noticing? Investigators combed through the Gee property again. They found blood droplets outside, suggesting the killer might have injured himself. But no hospitals in a 300-kilometer radius reported treating anyone with unexplained cuts or bruises. The trail was cold. Back in Beeson, rumors grew wild. Some said it was a drifter passing through. Others whispered about satanic rituals or revenge killings. A few even suspected Dylan, the 14-year-old, because of his behavioral issues, a cruel theory that reflected how desperate people were for an explanation. The police knew time was running out. They needed a breakthrough. On September 28th, 1 week after the murders, hundreds gathered for a memorial service. Inside a small community hall, photos of the Gee family lined the walls, smiling faces frozen in time. At the front stood an open casket for Rick. His was the only body that could be viewed. Urns containing the ashes of Ruth, Dylan, Justina, and Austin sat beside him. Nicole stood in silence, clutching Tabitha's favorite stuffed toy. Beside her was Christopher Harris, who had become her source of strength through the tragedy. To everyone there, he was the image of a devoted husband helping his wife survive the unthinkable. But not everyone was convinced. Among the attending officers, some quietly wondered about his calmness, about his perfectly intact hands, and his unusual willingness to help with every detail of the investigation. 2 days after the funeral, something subtle caught an officer's attention at the hospital. As Nicole and Chris visited Tabitha's room, the officer standing in the hallway noticed the shoes Harris was wearing, a pair of sneakers that looked identical to the ones whose print had been found in the mud outside the Gee house. At first, it seemed like coincidence. Many people wore that brand. Still, The officer reported it to his superiors. Investigators immediately checked their records, and sure enough, the pattern matched perfectly. The size wasn't confirmed yet, but the tread design was the same. When detectives looked closer at Harris's background, small cracks began to show. Christopher Harris wasn't the clean-cut family man he appeared to be. His record revealed a past littered with minor crimes: shoplifting, writing bad checks, possession of marijuana, all more than a decade old, but proof of a reckless streak. Then they uncovered something else. Nicole and Chris had divorced in 2006. Despite separating, they had later reconciled and had another child. But the marriage had been far from perfect. The divorce papers even cited physical cruelty as a cause. Detectives couldn't ignore it. Could Harris have been hiding something darker beneath the calm exterior? They called him back in for a second interview, this time with sharper questions. He didn't hesitate to cooperate. He gave fingerprints and palm prints voluntarily. When asked, he handed over his sneakers for examination. He even allowed them to search his vehicle, a light gray pickup truck that looked almost exactly like the one a neighbor had described. There was only one difference. It didn't have those distinctive chrome exhaust pipes. Still, officers couldn't shake the feeling they were getting closer. When investigators searched Harris's truck, they didn't find blood. But beneath a tarp in the truck bed, they found something that made everyone pause: a personal computer belonging to the Gee family. Harris claimed it wasn't what it looked like. He said Rick had loaned him the computer weeks earlier, and he simply hadn't returned it yet. But the detectives weren't buying it. Next, they went to the home where Harris lived with his brother Jason and Jason's girlfriend, Jennifer Ernest. Behind a shed in the backyard, they found a chrome weightlifting bar, the kind that, if attached to a pickup bed, could easily resemble the chrome exhaust pipes seen by the neighbor. Then, just a few meters away, they discovered a crowbar hidden near a creek, partially buried in the grass. A gray pickup, the missing family computer, the fake chrome pipes, and now a potential murder weapon. Too many coincidences to ignore. But still, the evidence was circumstantial. The investigation needed proof that directly tied Harris to the crime scene. That proof came when forensic analysts completed their work on the bloody handprint from the Gee bathroom. Under magnification, ridge by ridge, the match was confirmed. The print belonged to Christopher Harris. It was the breakthrough detectives had been waiting for. The handprint placed him inside the house at the crime scene on the night of the murders. Investigators confronted Harris with the evidence. His demeanor changed instantly. Calm turned to silence. He stopped answering questions and invoked his right to remain silent. On October 2, 2009, police arrested Christopher Harris for the murder of 5 members of the Gee family and the attempted murder of 3-year-old Tabitha. When the news hit Beeson, disbelief rippled through the town. The man everyone thought was grieving beside the victim's family, the man who attended the funeral and wept with Nicole, was now accused of being the killer. Residents were stunned. Many refused to believe it. To them, Chris was family. Even Nicole stood by him, publicly declaring his innocence. She wrote online that her husband had been framed and that the police were desperate to pin the murders on someone. She insisted he had no injuries, no scratches, and that he wasn't even capable of violence, claiming he was so gentle. He refused to gut fish for cooking. But to investigators, the evidence was overwhelming. The stolen computer, the crowbar, the shoe print, and, most damning of all, the bloody handprint linking Harris directly to the scene. Still, detectives wanted to understand why. Why would a husband and father massacre an entire family, including children he'd once helped raise? Harris continued to deny everything. He insisted he had nothing to do with the killings and said the police were making a terrible mistake. His younger brother Jason Harris, who'd been with him that night, was also arrested for obstruction and questioned repeatedly. At first, Jason supported his brother's alibi. He repeated the same story. They'd spent the night drinking at a bar in Lincoln, then gone home. But under mounting pressure and faced with possible life imprisonment for aiding a murderer, Jason began to break. Days later, he changed his story. Then he changed it again. In total, he gave investigators 13 different versions of what happened that night. Each time, small details shifted. Each time, his loyalty eroded just a little more. Finally, he told a story that made detectives' blood run cold. According to Jason, that night had started with drugs, alcohol, and a dangerous idea. The brothers had spent the evening drinking heavily and snorting cocaine. When their girlfriends refused to join them, Chris suggested they find someone else. Jason claimed his brother became obsessed with the thought of 16-year-old Justina Gee, Nicole's younger sister. Chris allegedly told Jason that Justina had been flirting with him and that she wanted him. Jason said he tried to laugh it off, assuming his brother was joking. But Chris was serious. In his intoxicated haze, he decided to drive to the Gee house, uninvited, intending to confront Justina. Jason stayed in the truck while Chris took a crowbar from the back and walked up to the porch. Moments later, Jason heard shouting, followed by the sounds of a struggle. Then came screams, first a man's, then a woman's, then something far worse. Jason said he froze, paralyzed by fear. Through the window, he saw flickering light and violent movement. Then a crash, glass shattering, and someone flew out of the house, landing hard on the lawn. It was Dylan Gee, blood running down his face. The boy tried to get up, screaming for help. Jason watched, horrified, as Dylan stumbled toward him, pleading, "Help me, he's killing them." But Jason didn't move. He couldn't. He sat trembling in the truck as Chris ran outside, chasing the boy across the yard. Chris caught up to him near the back fence and began swinging the crowbar again and again. When Dylan stopped moving, Chris went back inside the house. Jason said he stayed frozen behind the wheel, terrified. When Chris finally returned, he was carrying the Gee family's computer and was covered in blood. He tossed the crowbar into the truck and told Jason to drive. On the road out of town, Chris threw his sneakers and bloody clothes out the window, then demanded Jason burn what was left when they got home. That, Jason said, was the truth. When confronted with his brother's confession, Chris Harris told a very different story. He claimed that when he entered the Gee house, he found the family already dead. He said 14-year-old Dylan had gone on a violent rampage, killing his parents and siblings in a fit of madness. According to Harris, he stumbled upon the aftermath and was then attacked by Dylan, who came at him with a knife. Chris said he fought back in self-defense, killing the teenager only to stop the assault. The rest of the family, he claimed, was already gone. Detectives listened in disbelief. The evidence contradicted everything he said. The blood patterns, the injuries, the timeline, all pointed to a single attacker, not a child. And there was no proof anyone in the Gee household had used a knife that night. The blade found on the porch had Harris's fingerprints, not Dylan's. In 2013, nearly 4 years after the murders, the case of State of Illinois versus Christopher Harris finally went to trial. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, grieving neighbors, and police who'd worked the case from day one. The prosecution called it one of the most savage crimes ever committed in Logan County. They presented physical evidence, forensics, and testimonies that painted Harris as a man driven by lust and rage. They argued that his motive was sexual, that he had entered the Gee home that night intending to assault 16-year-old Justina. And when confronted by Rick, he turned violent. The defense countered with the Dylan theory, portraying the teenager as a disturbed boy with behavioral problems and violent tendencies. They described him as addicted to video games, impulsive, and unstable. They cited his ADHD diagnosis, his history of discipline at school, and even brought up teachers' reports about his misbehavior. Their argument was simple. Dylan snapped. Chris Harris just happened to walk in at the wrong time. But the evidence told another story. Forensic experts testified that the angle and force of the blows were consistent with an adult male, not a teenager. The victim's defensive wounds suggested they'd been overpowered by someone much stronger. Blood spatter on Harris's jeans, recovered from a trash pile behind his brother's home, matched several of the victims. Then came the most damning evidence: the bloody handprint lifted from the bathroom countertop, a perfect match to Christopher Harris's palm. It placed him inside the house during the murders, not afterward as he claimed. The prosecution also revealed Harris's social media posts in the days before the crime. Rants about wanting to get away from negativity, and messages hinting at resentment toward Nicole's family. Finally, prosecutors called Jason Harris to the stand. His testimony was devastating. He recounted the night, the drugs, the plan, and his brother's descent into violence. The courtroom sat silent as he described Dylan's desperate attempts to fight back and protect his family. Jason's voice shook as he admitted he'd done nothing to stop it. Then came an unexpected twist. A former cellmate of Harris took the stand, claiming Chris had confessed everything to him in prison. According to the inmate, Harris said he attacked Rick when the man refused to let him into Justina's room. He beat Rick to death with the crowbar, then turned on Ruth when she came to help. When Dylan tried to defend his mother with a kitchen knife, Harris overpowered him and threw him through the window. The inmate said Harris expressed no real remorse, only frustration that he hadn't burned down the house to destroy the evidence. The confession sealed the prosecution's case. After a 6-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 12 hours. On May 31, 2013, Christopher Harris was found guilty on all counts, 5 counts of first-degree murder, and 1 count of attempted murder for little Tabitha. During sentencing, he addressed the court, claiming he had made bad choices that night, but still insisted he hadn't committed the murders. His words moved no one. The judge handed down one of the harshest sentences in Illinois history: 5 consecutive life terms, plus 30 years for attempted murder, 30 years for home invasion, and 20 years for robbery. Christopher Harris would never walk free again. His brother Jason, in exchange for his testimony, received a 10-year suspended sentence for concealing a crime and obstructing justice. Many felt the punishment was far too lenient, considering he'd done nothing to stop his brother that night. But without his cooperation, prosecutors might never have secured a conviction. In the months that followed, Beeson slowly tried to heal. The Gee home stood empty, a constant reminder of the horror that had unfolded inside. Eventually, with approval from the state environmental agency, the fire department burned the house to the ground, erasing the physical scar but not the memory. At St. Francis Hospital, Tabitha continued her long recovery. Despite multiple surgeries, doctors were amazed by her progress. The trauma to her skull caused partial memory loss, a small mercy that spared her from reliving that night. 2 Illinois state police officers were assigned to protect her during her hospital stay. Over time, they became her playmates and surrogate uncles. They painted her nails, read her stories, and even threw her a small birthday party in her hospital room. After weeks of therapy, Tabitha learned to walk and speak again. When she was finally discharged, her older sister Nicole, now widowed in all but name, took custody of her. The two began rebuilding what little remained of their family. To honor the victims, Beeson residents built a memorial playground on the edge of town. A granite plaque bears the names of Rick, Ruth, Justina, Dylan, and Austin Gee, along with a simple inscription. In their memory, may children always find laughter here. For many, Dylan's name carried a special weight. Early rumors had painted him as the possible killer, echoing Harris's false story. But investigators and teachers who knew him fought to restore his image. They called him what he truly was, a boy who tried to save his family. When television producers later recreated the case for a true crime series portraying Dylan as a violent child, local officers wrote an open letter condemning it. They reminded viewers that Dylan had died a hero, not a monster. It was August 21st, 2017, a quiet morning in the peaceful suburb of Farmington Hills, Michigan. The day began like any other until two teenagers made a discovery that shattered their lives forever. In the backyard of their home lay their mother, 35-year-old Nada Harana, face up on the cold stone patio. At first, everything seemed like a tragic accident, as if she had simply fallen from the second-floor window. But almost instantly, details began to whisper that something wasn't right. Moments earlier, 14-year-old Aya Alantawi had been frantically searching for her mother. She couldn't find her anywhere in the house. The car keys were still on the counter, her bag untouched. Then, glancing out a window, Aya froze. Her mother's body was sprawled below, lifeless. She screamed for her brother. 16-year-old Muhammad rushed to the patio. Aya dialed 911, her voice trembling as she handed the phone to her brother. He began CPR, counting aloud, 1, 2, 3, 4, his voice shaking. When the first police officer arrived, Aya led him through the backyard. Muhammad was still over their mother, pressing on her chest. The officer took over CPR, but when paramedics arrived, it was too late. There was no pulse. Nada was pronounced dead at the scene. At first glance, it looked like a fatal fall from the guest room window above. But the more officers observed, the stranger it became. Inside that room, everything was too perfect. A small stepladder stood neatly in place beside a spotless bucket of water. A bottle of cleaning solution balanced on top. The floor was dry. Nothing looked disturbed. Not even the bucket's surface rippled, as though no one had been moving around it. The window's edge had streaks of dried cleaner, not glass cleaner, but Tilex, a product for tiles, not windows. On the sill, officers found a single piece of adhesive tape, for reasons no one could explain, and outside near the body, a towel lay twisted on the ground, soaked in a strong chemical odor. The position of Nada's body also made no sense. She lay on her back, unusual for a fall. There was no blood, no shattered bones, and no signs of a violent impact. Something was off. Inside the house, everything else seemed undisturbed. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. And yet, the more police searched, the more they realized this wasn't an accident at all. When detectives reviewed the home security footage, one camera changed everything. It didn't capture the window directly, but the light and shadows reflected on a nearby wall. At 5:53 a.m., the light in the guest room flicked on. A silhouette appeared, a person moving near the window. Seconds later, the shadow seemed to lift something heavy from the floor and push it through the open window. After applause, the figure leaned forward, peering out, then disappeared. The footage was chilling. It confirmed one thing: Nada didn't fall. She was pushed. The autopsy later revealed the truth. She had been strangled to death before being thrown from the window. The fall was staged to hide a murder. Before we go further, share in the comments Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Nada was a devoted mother of 3, a fitness trainer known for her bright energy and disciplined lifestyle. Neighbors often saw her jogging at dawn. Friends remembered her as strong, warm, and endlessly devoted to her kids. But behind her optimism was a long struggle, a collapsing marriage, and a bitter divorce. Her husband, Dr. Basil Alantawi, had once been a respected internist. The two had married in Syria in 1999 and later moved to the US. But their relationship had crumbled under years of tension and control. Nada wanted freedom. In 2016, on Valentine's Day, she accused Basil of pushing her down the stairs during an argument. He denied it, but eventually pleaded guilty to domestic violence. The court ordered him to stay away for 2 years, wear an ankle monitor, and undergo probation. Around the same time, Basil's medical career fell apart, charged with Medicaid fraud, and forced to pay nearly $280,000 in fines. He lost his license, his income, and his status. Nada filed for divorce. 2 days before her death, she was set to appear in court. She wanted a clean break, custody of her children, and a chance to rebuild her life. But Basil resented her. He accused her of Americanizing the kids, especially their daughters, and turning them away from Syrian traditions. To the world, Basil appeared devastated when police told him Nada was gone. He collapsed to his knees outside the house. But detectives noticed something. His alibi was airtight. His ankle monitor proved he hadn't been near the house that morning. That left one chilling question. If Basil wasn't there, who was the shadow in the window? Police turned back to the footage. They slowed it down, frame by frame. The shadow's build looked distinctly male, short hair, broad shoulders. Then came another clue, the 911 call. In the footage, Mohammed was seen leaning over his mother's body. But something was off. His movements didn't match the voice from the call. On audio, he was counting CPR compressions. But on video, he stopped several times, sitting motionless beside her, pretending to perform CPR. It looked staged. When Aya arrived with the police officer, he suddenly began pressing harder, as if trying to make it look real. The officer even noticed he was holding his phone in one hand while doing CPR with the other. Detectives decided they needed answers, and quickly. A few days later, they brought Mohammed in for questioning. At first, his tone was calm, even polite. He told them he went to bed around 11:30 p.m. and woke up at 6 a.m., only after hearing his sister scream. But that wasn't what he'd told police earlier. At the scene, Heeb said 6:30. That half-hour difference caught their attention. When asked about his relationship with his mother, he said, "We're pretty normal. We used to have issues when the divorce started, but things have been fine." But things weren't fine. Detectives began pressing about the cameras. Did he know they were recording? He said no. Then they told him someone had been seen beside his mother right before she fell. They gave him an opening. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe you were helping her clean the window. He froze. His story began to shift. He said Nada was cleaning that morning, and he'd only brought her a spray bottle. She'd been on a ladder, removing the screen. She leaned forward, he said, and she tripped. I tried to grab her, but she fell. I didn't know what to do, so I went to take a shower. I thought I was dreaming. Detectives knew the story didn't add up. But before they could push further, his father arrived, furious. Basil demanded the interview stop immediately, insisting his son wouldn't say another word without a lawyer. When investigators analyzed Mohammed's phone, everything suddenly made sense. That morning, starting at 4:27 a.m., nearly 90 minutes before his mother died, he had called one number more than 50 times. The contact name? love. 8 of those calls happened before 5 a.m., around the time security footage showed the bedroom light switching on. Then at 5:55 a.m., the exact moment his mother's body fell from the window, Muhammad received an incoming call. It was from Love. Police traced the number. Love wasn't a girlfriend or a friend. It was his father, Basil. Detectives uncovered months of secret communication between father and son. Hundreds of messages, photos, and recordings from inside the house. Muhammad had secretly been recording his mother's conversations, even her private talks with her divorce lawyer, and sending them to Basil. Worse still, the way they labeled each other in their phones told investigators everything they needed to know. In Muhammad's phone, his father was saved as Love, his mother as Dog. One message, sent a month before the murder, showed Nata warning her son that she knew about his father's illegal activities. Information that could send Basil to prison. Muhammad had forwarded that message to his father immediately. Weeks later, another photo appeared on Basil's phone. A picture of the second-floor window, the same one Nata would fall from. It looked like a rehearsal. By this point, detectives were sure this was a planned murder, not an accident. But they still needed proof. When they returned to the house, they searched again. Inside the washing machine, they found a brown bath mat soaked in water and chemicals. In the dryer, a pair of jeans and a t-shirt belonging to Muhammad. Both were damp and freshly cleaned. Nearby, bottles of bleach, antifreeze, and rat poison lined the garage shelves. Everything was seized for testing. But the most incriminating detail came from the family computer. At 8:10 a.m., while paramedics were still at the scene, someone had tried to delete files from it, remotely. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. That same day, police moved in and arrested 16-year-old Muhammad Al-Antawi, charging him with the murder of his mother, Natada Harana. During the interrogation that followed, Muhammad said little. His lawyer advised complete silence, but investigators already had enough. Messages, calls, and video footage that painted a chilling timeline. For detectives, the evidence suggested one thing. The 16-year-old had strangled his mother and staged the scene to make it look like a fall. The motive? Loyalty, manipulation, and control. Muhammad's love for his father bordered on obsession. To him, Basil wasn't just a parent. He was a hero, a man wronged by the woman who had destroyed their family. When Nata filed for divorce and prepared to testify against Basil, it threatened the image Muhammad worshipped. And Basil, stripped of his license and wealth, relied on his son's devotion. Together, their secret communications became an echo chamber of resentment. Investigators believed Basil didn't need to pull the trigger. He only had to plant the idea. In September 2017, forensic analysts confirmed what detectives feared. The towel found near Nata's body contained traces of cleaning chemicals and faint residues consistent with ammonia-based solvents. The bath mat from the washer showed similar traces, alongside fibers matching the fabric around Nata's neck. While no single test identified the exact substance, the evidence pointed to chemical suffocation, the same way the coroner described her cause of death. Strangulation with chemical burns consistent with a cleaning agent. Still, prosecutors were cautious. The case was complex. There was no direct footage of Muhammad's face, no eyewitnesses, and a father who appeared legally uninvolved. But the digital trail was overwhelming. In one recovered text exchange, Basil wrote, "Don't worry, you know what to do. Allah knows your intentions." The message was sent 2 days before the murder. When the trial finally began, years had passed. The pandemic delayed proceedings, and Muhammad, now 19, walked into the courtroom, taller, quieter, emotionless. The jury saw a young man in a suit, but the prosecution saw a manipulative killer who had betrayed the person who loved him most. Prosecutors reconstructed the morning of August 21st in haunting detail. They showed the jury the security footage, those flickering shadows on the wall, the silhouette pushing something heavy through the window, the timestamp, 5:53 a.m. Then the footage of Muhammad on the patio, pretending to give CPR, counting loudly while barely touching his mother's chest. They argued that Muhammad killed his mother to prevent her from testifying at the upcoming divorce hearing, a hearing that could have sent his father to prison. Aya, now 17, took the stand. She sat straight, her voice soft but unwavering. "My brother wasn't the same after the divorce started," she said. "He thought Mom was trying to destroy our family. He said she'd get what she deserves." Her words pierced the courtroom. Aya described how her brother's anger grew every time their mother spoke about court, how he started siding completely with their father, parroting his words, accusing Nada of betrayal. "He was obsessed with Dad," she said quietly. "Whatever Dad said was the truth." She recalled their final morning together, the confusion, the panic, the image of her brother kneeling beside their mother pretending to save her. When the prosecutor asked if she believed her father was involved, Aya didn't hesitate. "Yes, both of them," she said. "My mom feared him, and he used my brother to do what he couldn't." The courtroom remained silent long after she stepped down. The defense built its case around one word: doubt. They mentioned a male co-worker from Nada's fitness club, someone who had visited the house before, suggesting police ignored him completely once they decided Muhammad was guilty. They reminded jurors that the chemical evidence was inconclusive, that no single test proved a specific toxin. After just 1 week of testimony, the case went to the jury. Deliberations lasted barely 2 hours. When the verdict came, Muhammad showed no emotion. Guilty. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 35 to 60 years in prison. He would spend his entire adulthood behind bars. Basil Alantawi, despite the calls, the messages, and the evidence of manipulation, walked free. Prosecutors said there wasn't enough proof that he had directly conspired in the murder. His son's silence protected him. As the courtroom emptied, Aya spoke briefly to a reporter outside. Her voice was steady, but her words carried the weight of everything she'd lost. "They both killed her," she said. "One with his hands, the other with his words." She cut all ties with her father and brother that day. Let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think? Could a 16-year-old really plan something this cold-blooded? Or was his father pulling the strings? A 19-year-old Canadian girl left home chasing her dream of romance in a country she had never seen before, England. She thought she had found love, but within weeks, she was discovered in a bloodbath, her life brutally cut short. One of the most twisted crimes imaginable followed. Her killer didn't just end her life. He filmed the aftermath, calmly sitting beside her body. Was it revenge, obsession, or something even darker? This is the chilling story of Ashley Wadsworth. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon, British Columbia, a small Canadian city known for its lakes, ski slopes, and tight-knit community. Her childhood was filled with family, lots of it. Her parents, Kenneth and Christy, divorced when she was still young, but that didn't fracture her world the way it sometimes does for children. Her father remarried and had 2 more children, while her mother remained closely connected with Ashley and her older sister, Haley. If anyone defined Ashley's day-to-day life, it was Haley. The 2 sisters were inseparable, more like best friends than siblings. Back in 2015, when Ashley was just 12, she met a boy online through a mutual friend. His name was Jack Seppel, a 15-year-old from Essex, England. At first, it was innocent. Friendly chats between 2 kids an ocean apart. They talked about school, music, hobbies, and everyday things. But as the years passed, what began as casual conversations deepened into something more serious. Jack became a familiar voice in Ashley's daily life. To her family, Jack was a name they heard often, but a face only seen through photos and video calls. He sent her gifts, teddy bears, clothes, little tokens that crossed the Atlantic and made their long-distance friendship feel more real. Over time, Ashley's feelings for him grew into young love. For a girl with adventurous dreams, the idea of meeting someone from another country felt exciting, romantic even. But Jack Seppel was not the ordinary boy he appeared to be on the surface. Jack was born on January 9, 1999, in Chelmsford, Essex. His childhood was far less stable than Ashley's. He lived with his mother Tracy and stepfather Ricky. His relationship with his biological father was strained, and unlike Ashley's big extended family, Jack's connections were limited. He kept contact with his sister, Nadia, but had little relationship with his brother Jordan. Friends remembered him as witty and charming at times, but also unpredictable. In school, he struggled academically and socially, and his temper sometimes got the better of him. There were early signs of volatility, episodes of aggression, outbursts that unsettled those around him. Still, online, Jack presented a softer side. He was attentive, funny, and eager to impress Ashley. He complimented her often and made her feel as though she was the center of his world. That attention became addictive. For a young girl in Canada, the idea of a boy in England who cared so deeply felt magical. But there were warning signs. Jack's attention sometimes crossed into obsession. During fights, Ashley would block him, only to find he had created new accounts to reach her. He tattooed her name on his arm, a gesture that her parents found excessive for a teenage romance. He grew jealous if she spent too much time with friends, even while he maintained his own connections with other girls. Despite this, Ashley was captivated. Over the years, their bond only tightened. She defended him when her family raised concerns, brushing off their unease with optimism that he was simply misunderstood. By the time she was in her late teens, Ashley had already begun to dream of visiting him in person. Their love story, at least from Ashley's perspective, felt like destiny. 2 people separated by continents, but united by years of online closeness. Yet behind Jack's charm lingered shadows Ashley could not yet see clearly. Shadows that would one day turn her adventurous dream into the darkest of realities. In November 2021, Ashley decided it was finally time to turn years of messages and late-night calls into reality. With money she'd saved from part-time jobs, she booked her first international flight to England. To her, it wasn't just a trip. It was a leap into the future she had been dreaming of since she was a teenager. On November 12, 2021, she landed in the UK on a 6-month tourist visa. The very next day, she and Jack met in person at London Gatwick Airport. For Ashley, it was surreal. She immediately posted a new profile picture of the 2 of them together, her face glowing with excitement. Friends back in Canada flooded her page with supportive comments. Jack seemed exactly like the boy she had imagined, attentive, affectionate, eager to hold her hand in every photo. They even adopted a puppy, Winston, and filled Ashley's social media with romantic captions. To anyone watching, it looked like a fairy tale. At first, Ashley brushed off the uneasy feelings that came with Jack's world. She told herself the tattoos, the rough apartment, even his moody silences were small details compared to finally being with him. In her eyes, they were building a life together, taking walks through town, cooking meals side by side, playing with their new puppy. For a brief time, it almost felt like the fairy tale she had been chasing for years. But it didn't take long for Jack's darker side to resurface. Slowly, the warmth he showed in public shifted behind closed doors. He grew controlling, discouraging Ashley from speaking with neighbors or venturing out without him. When she expressed interest in joining church services through missionaries she had secretly contacted, Jack forbade it. Ashley kept in touch anyway, deleting her conversations to avoid his suspicion. Even the missionaries sensed something was wrong. She admitted to them in private that she knew she deserved better, but she still clung to the hope that she could fix him. The control soon turned violent. Only weeks into her stay, Jack struck her during an argument, later admitting it to his mother in a text. Ashley covered the bruises with smiles online, but in private, she documented the injuries on a hidden account and confided in her sister, Haley. She begged Haley not to tell their mother, terrified her family would hate Jack if they knew the truth. In December, things spiraled further. Jack attempted suicide after another heated fight. Swallowing a handful of anxiety pills, Ashley was the one who called the ambulance, the one who stayed at his side while doctors stabilized him. From that day forward, she was assigned the role of his caregiver, given a locked box to manage his medication. For a 19-year-old far from home, it was a crushing responsibility. Her family pleaded with her to come back to Canada. Haley begged during late-night calls, their mother even warning that Ashley was in real danger. But Ashley resisted. She insisted Jack would get better, that this was only a phase. She told herself her love could heal him. By January, the violence escalated again. During one argument, Jack smashed a glass over her head. Another time, he hurled objects at her while she was on a video call with Haley. Her sister watched in horror as Ashley cleaned up broken glass with Jack pacing angrily behind her. Every time, Ashley promised she would leave, then stayed. She was ready to come home. Quietly, her mother booked a flight for February 3rd. For the first time, Ashley let herself believe she might escape. But leaving Jack wasn't simple. He sensed her growing distance, and his paranoia sharpened. He accused her of sneaking off, of hiding secrets on her phone. The smallest disagreements turned into hours of shouting. Ashley tried to stay calm, but she confided in missionaries and friends that she was terrified. Her messages painted a picture of someone torn between survival and loyalty. A girl trying to hold on just long enough to get on that plane. On the morning of February 1st, Jack's rage exploded again. A neighbor heard Ashley screaming through the walls. Moments later, she appeared at the woman's door barefoot and bleeding from her hand. Sobbing that Jack had smashed her phone and even thrown their puppy against the wall. Still, Ashley begged her not to call police. She was desperate to avoid setting him off further. The neighbor reluctantly confronted Jack, who smoothed things over with false calm before shutting the door. Ashley's family, unaware of how dire things had become, stayed on the phone with her for hours that morning, reassuring her that in just 2 days, she'd be safe back in Canada. Jack's paranoia reached its peak just hours after Ashley's last call with her family. When she told him she planned to return to Canada, something inside him snapped. Convinced she was betraying him, He demanded access to her phone. What began as accusations quickly escalated into violence. Inside that cramped apartment, Ashley's pleas went unheard. Jack forced her to the ground and strangled her until she stopped moving. But he didn't stop there. Seized by a frenzy, he retrieved a kitchen knife and stabbed her repeatedly. Over 90 wounds inflicted in a matter of minutes. The brutality left no doubt about his rage and his refusal to let her go alive. What followed was just as disturbing. With Ashley's lifeless body lying beside him, Jack sat down at his computer and played video games. At one point, he changed his profile picture to a selfie of them together, adding the caption, "Always mine." He even recorded a video message for Haley, Ashley's sister, saying he loved Ashley but couldn't let her leave. Her body was visible in the background. Instead of reaching out for help, Jack tried to cover his tracks. He responded to worried messages on Ashley's social media, pretending to be her and assuring friends she was fine. But the facade didn't last. Hours later, he called his sister Nadia and confessed outright, even showing her Ashley's body on the floor. At 4:13 p.m., police entered the apartment after a tip from one of Ashley's friends abroad. What they found was chilling. Jack covered in blood, Ashley's body nearby, and no sign of remorse beyond a flimsy claim that his mind wasn't working. The fairy tale Ashley had believed in for years had ended in unimaginable horror. Jack was arrested on the spot, his clothes stained with blood, his confessions spilling out almost as quickly as officers arrived. He claimed he had suffered a psychotic episode, but investigators weren't convinced. Toxicology tests later revealed only cannabis and standard levels of prescribed medication in his system, nothing to excuse the sheer brutality of what had happened. The case against him was airtight. Police recovered the video he had recorded after the killing, his messages sent while pretending to be Ashley, and the confession he gave to his sister. Ashley's family, thousands of miles away, in Canada, were left to piece together their daughter's final hours through fragments of police updates and the messages she had sent before she died. When the trial date came, Ashley's parents traveled to the UK to be there in person. What they heard in court was even more devastating than the crime itself. Jack's violent history, hidden from them until now, was laid bare. Years earlier, he had harassed and terrorized other women, even breaching restraining orders again and again. He had assaulted his own mother, broken into properties, and been accused of holding another girlfriend captive. None of it had shown up when Ashley's family searched his name online before her trip. In the courtroom, Jack showed little emotion. He pleaded guilty, and the judge made it clear there was only one possible outcome: life imprisonment, with a minimum of 23 years before he could even be considered for parole. For Ashley's family, justice was delivered. But it was hollow. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a mother's best friend, and a niece's hero. The sentence could not undo the silence that now echoed where Ashley's laughter once had been. Ashley's parents returned to Canada, carrying the unbearable weight of her absence. In Vernon, the community rallied. Friends, relatives, and even strangers came together to support the family, raising funds to bring Ashley's body home. On February 23, 2022, her funeral was held, live-streamed, so people from around the world could join. Those who spoke remembered her as adventurous, funny, and full of light, a young woman whose kindness touched everyone she met. In Essex, a vigil honored her memory. Neighbors laid roses at the apartment where she had spent her last days, standing silently with her parents in grief. For Ashley's family, it was a moment to mourn, but also a call to action. They questioned how someone with Jack's violent past could appear invisible online. They spoke publicly about Clare's Law, the UK's domestic abuse disclosure scheme, and urged for broader awareness so no other family would be blindsided as they were. Ashley's sister Haley later shared her belief that Ashley still sent them small signs, doors creaking open, lights flickering, as if reminding them she hadn't really left. Her story became more than tragedy. It became a warning, a reminder that love should never come at the cost of safety, and that silence around abuse can be deadly. It was a quiet October afternoon at Danvers High School in Massachusetts. Classes had ended. The corridors echoed with lockers closing and footsteps fading. By 4 o'clock, most of the building stood still. But one teacher, 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer, was still inside preparing lessons for the next day. Within hours, that ordinary school would become the center of a homicide investigation that stunned an entire state. That evening, Colleen's parents grew uneasy. She was usually home before dinner, always sent a quick message if she stayed late. By 7 p.m., calls went unanswered. Her car was still parked in its usual spot outside the school. When colleagues confirmed she hadn't been seen since afternoon classes, police were called to check the building. Officers entered the empty school around 11 p.m. The lights in most rooms were off. Only emergency bulbs lit the long corridors. They began a routine search, expecting perhaps an accident or a medical emergency. Near the second-floor women's bathroom, they noticed faint smears of what looked like blood on the doorframe and on the floor tiles just beyond it. The marks were small, almost easy to miss, but enough to halt the search team. The area was sealed, and detectives from the Essex County Major Crimes Unit were notified. Technicians collected samples and began following the faint trail along the corridor. In a nearby trash receptacle, they found wadded paper towels streaked with blood. What the investigators didn't yet realize was that the school's security cameras had recorded the entire sequence leading up to these discoveries. At 2:54 p.m. that day, the hallway camera outside the math department captured Colleen walking calmly toward the bathroom. She was smiling, wearing a light-colored top and patterned pants. Nothing appeared unusual. Less than half a minute later, the same camera caught one of her students, 14-year-old Philip Chisholm, turning the corner behind her. He paused briefly, looked around, then reached into his bag and slipped on a pair of blue gloves. Without hesitation, he followed Colleen into the bathroom. The door closed behind him. Several minutes passed. The footage showed no movement outside the door until 3:06 p.m., when Philip stepped out. His expression was blank. He looked down the hallway, adjusted his backpack strap, and walked calmly down the stairs toward the lower floor. Moments later, another camera caught him entering a deserted corridor where he changed his clothes, removing the hoodie and shirt. Pulling on different garments he had brought in his bag. After changing, he walked to a maintenance area, retrieved a large blue recycling bin, and began dragging it back upstairs. The bin wobbled and scraped against the floor as he pushed it toward the same bathroom. He maneuvered it inside. The door closed once more. Several minutes later, he came out again, this time pulling the bin backward into the hall. The container looked noticeably heavier. He pushed it through a side exit, leading toward a service road behind the school. The path bordered by trees that opened into a small wooded area. After that point, the cameras recorded nothing further. When detectives later viewed this footage, the atmosphere in the control room turned cold. The images were methodical, not frantic. A teacher entering a bathroom, a student following, repeated trips in and out, and a heavy bin leaving the building. Guided by what they saw on video, search teams expanded their sweep to the back grounds of Danvers High. Officers followed a faint track of wheel marks from the door to the narrow service lane. Under the light of portable lamps, they moved into the trees behind the athletic field. About 20 yards from the rear wall, half hidden by leaves and brush, they found the recycling bin. Inside was Colleen Ritzer's body. The discovery turned a missing person inquiry into a homicide investigation within minutes. Detectives cordoned off the woods and began collecting evidence. The bin contained several of Colleen's belongings, a school ID, scattered teaching materials, and pieces of clothing. Blood traces inside matched the samples from the bathroom. A box cutter, believed to be the weapon, would later be linked to the suspect. Forensic teams worked through the night, documenting every step between the building and the dump site. Drag marks on the ground, impressions from the bin's wheels, and fibers from Philip's clothing created a continuous chain from the bathroom to the trees. What shocked investigators most was the composure suggested by the movements. There was no sign of panic or haste. Each act appeared planned and deliberate. Who was Colleen Ritzer? As the investigation unfolded, attention turned to the woman at the center of it. Colleen had grown up in Andover, Massachusetts, graduating from Assumption College with a degree in math education. Friends described her as kind, optimistic, and deeply devoted to teaching. At just 24, she had already built a reputation for connecting with students who struggled academically or socially. Her classroom walls carried positive messages. Her favorite phrase, "Be good to one another," had become something of a personal motto. Colleagues said she often stayed late to prepare lessons or offer extra help. She believed every student could succeed if given patience and understanding. Nothing about her life suggested conflict or enemies. That contrast, her warmth against the brutality of what investigators were uncovering, made the case even harder to comprehend. By morning, news vans surrounded the campus. Parents gathered outside the police barricade, some clutching photos, others simply standing in silence. Danvers was the kind of town where teachers were neighbors and coaches doubled as family friends. The thought that violence had erupted inside a school bathroom felt impossible. The principal addressed reporters briefly, confirming that a teacher was dead and that police had identified a person of interest. Classes were canceled. Students were offered counseling. Many wept openly when they learned the victim's name. Inside the command post, detectives reviewed every second of footage again, matching timestamps with witness statements. They established that after leaving the woods, Philip had exited the campus alone. Cameras around town later captured him walking through a shopping area, eating at a restaurant, then entering a local cinema to watch a movie. His behavior appeared calm, mechanical, even casual. Investigators began compiling Philip Chisholm's background. He had recently moved from Tennessee with his mother after his parents' divorce. At Danvers High, he was known as a quiet, athletic freshman who played soccer and performed well in class. Teachers described him as polite but withdrawn. Colleen had taken notice of his isolation and encouraged him to participate more, offering extra help in math. No one reported disciplinary issues, yet the precision of his actions in the footage suggested a level of intent that contradicted his mild reputation. Detectives traced his movements from the moment he left school property. They learned he had been spotted near a nearby shopping plaza, then walking along Route 1 late at night. A state trooper on patrol reported a teenage boy matching his description walking alone around 2:30 a.m. At that point, police didn't know whether Philip was missing, fleeing, or in danger himself. The trooper stopped to check on him. The boy gave his name quietly, Philip. He carried a backpack and wore different clothes than those seen in the school footage. The trooper noticed what looked like reddish stains on his shoes. When asked where he was going, the boy shrugged. A brief conversation confirmed the connection. This was the same student last seen with Colleen Ritzer. He was taken into custody without resistance. During the search of his backpack, officers found several items that removed any ambiguity: Colleen's driver's license, her credit cards, and a box cutter with visible blood residue. As dawn broke, detectives prepared to question the teenager, now sitting silently in a holding room. They had the footage, the weapon, and the belongings, but not the reason. What could make a 14-year-old commit such an act inside his own school? The answers would come slowly, in fragments, over the next several hours of interrogation. The interview room at the Danvers police station was quiet. Philip Chisholm sat across from two detectives, his head lowered, his hands resting calmly on the table. He had been found walking alone on Route 1 in the middle of the night. Blood on his shoes, a backpack filled with incriminating items, and no explanation for where he was going. The detective started gently, asking basic questions: his name, where he'd been that day, and why he had Colleen Ritzer's identification in his bag. Philip barely answered. When they mentioned Colleen's name, he looked up for the first time. One detective asked, "Did something happen to your teacher?" After a long pause, he whispered, "Yes." The room fell silent. Detectives leaned forward. "What happened?" He hesitated, then spoke softly, a tone that never changed during the entire interview. He said Colleen had triggered something inside him when she mentioned the word Tennessee. That single word, tied to memories of his father and a past filled with anger, made him furious. "She shouldn't have said it," he muttered. When asked if she had done anything wrong, he said, "No. She was nice." Then, without emotion, he described what he had done. He said he followed her into the bathroom, waited until she turned her back, and attacked. He admitted using the box cutter found in his bag, and later moving her body with the recycling bin seen on camera. When asked why, he couldn't give an answer. He didn't cry. He didn't show regret. Every sentence came out cold, detached, and controlled. Detectives asked if she was still alive when he left her. He stared down and said quietly, "No." Forensic teams worked through the night to confirm what his words implied. Colleen's body had been found behind the school, partially hidden under leaves and branches. A torn section of her clothing and biological evidence proved she had been sexually assaulted before she died. The autopsy showed multiple sharp force injuries to her neck, consistent with the blade of the box cutter Philip had carried. Her cause of death was homicide by stabbing and strangulation. The details were horrific, but investigators kept their focus on the evidence. DNA on the weapon matched both of them. Traces of blood on Philip's shoes matched hers. Fibers from his hoodie were found on her clothing, and every movement he described lined up perfectly with the CCTV footage. From the moment he followed her into the bathroom, to changing his clothes, retrieving the bin, and dragging it out of the school. The sequence was deliberate. There was no panic, no chaos, no attempt to flee immediately. After killing her, he cleaned up, changed clothes, left the building, and went to eat dinner. Security cameras from a nearby Wendy's showed him sitting alone, calmly eating a meal. Later, he bought a ticket at a movie theater and watched Gravity, as if nothing had happened. By the time police found him walking along Route 1 hours later, he appeared relaxed and cooperative. Inside his backpack were Colleen's credit cards, underwear, ID, and the bloodied box cutter, along with a handwritten note that read, "I hate you all." The next morning, the district attorney announced 3 charges: first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery. Because of the brutality and planning involved, prosecutors decided to try him as an adult, despite being only 14 at the time. The community of Danvers could hardly process it. A high-achieving freshman, quiet, polite, athletic, accused of murdering and raping his teacher inside their own school. News spread quickly. Parents showed up outside the courthouse holding candles. Teachers stood together in silence. The entire town felt frozen, unable to comprehend how something so violent could happen in a place built for safety and learning. Colleen's family spoke briefly to the press. Her mother said softly, she loved teaching. She loved her students. All she wanted was to make a difference. Those words would echo throughout the trial. The trial opened in late 2015 at Salem Superior Court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, teachers, students, and community members all watching a boy who had become a national headline. Philip Chisholm walked in wearing a suit and tie. He was 16 now, taller, older, but just as expressionless as he had been during his interrogation. His defense team argued that he was mentally ill, suffering from psychosis and extreme emotional trauma caused by years of abuse from his father. They claimed he experienced a dissociative episode, that he wasn't in control of himself that afternoon. They asked the jury to consider his age, his mental state, and his isolation. But prosecutors presented a different story, one of planning, awareness, and control. They walked the jury step by step through the evidence. They showed the hallway footage. Colleen walking toward the bathroom, Philip following, the gloves, the clothes change, the bin. They displayed the items found in his bag, the weapon, her belongings, the handwritten note, and they revealed his calm behavior after the murder. Eating at Wendy's, watching a movie, walking alone through town. Assistant District Attorney Kate McDougall told the jury, this was not confusion. This was control. He knew exactly what he was doing. She described Colleen as a teacher who dedicated her life to helping others, and called Philip's actions planned, deliberate, and deeply cruel. During the trial, the footage was played again, silent, grainy clips projected on a large screen. In one, Colleen walks down the hall, papers in hand. In the next, Philip follows, glancing around before slipping on gloves. Then a door closes, and minutes later, he emerges alone. The courtroom stayed silent. Even the jurors avoided looking directly at the screen. After nearly 2 weeks of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned its decision. Philip Chisholm was found guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and armed robbery. Because he was under 18 at the time of the crime, Massachusetts law spared him a life sentence without parole. Instead, the judge sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years, plus consecutive sentences for the rape and robbery charges. When the sentence was read, Philip showed no reaction. He didn't look at the Ritzer family. He didn't speak. He simply stood, expressionless, as the guards led him out of the courtroom. Judge David Lowy said, "Your age will not excuse your actions. What you did was planned, intentional, and unimaginably cruel." For the Ritzer family, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but not peace. Her father later said, "Nothing will ever make this right. We just hope no one ever forgets who she was." The murder of Colleen Ritzer remains one of the most disturbing school crimes in American history, not just for its brutality, but for its setting. It happened in a place meant to protect, between a teacher and a student she wanted to help. The CCTV footage from that afternoon still haunts those who've seen it. It doesn't show screaming or chaos, only calm moments before something unspeakable. A teacher walking down a hallway. A student following a few steps behind. A door closing, and silence. Colleen's story serves as a painful reminder that evil sometimes hides behind quiet faces. She believed deeply in kindness, and in the end, that kindness was met with the worst kind of betrayal. But even after her death, her message continues. Every scholarship given in her name, every student who chooses to teach because of her, and every simple act of kindness done in her memory keeps her spirit alive. If you're still watching, please hit the like button. It won't cost you anything, but it helps us a lot. And if you want to hear more true stories like this, real, haunting, and unforgettable, make sure to subscribe to our channel. It was a quiet Friday evening in Bristol, but inside one small family home, screams tore through the walls. Then, silence. A moment later, a sound that would haunt the neighbors forever. At the top of the stairs, a young child stood frozen, watching his father collapse to the floor, while his mother whispered, "Please, don't die." By the time police arrived, she was already scrubbing the blood from the tiles. It was the evening of March 25th, 2022, in the quiet Bristol suburb of Kingswood. Music from a nearby pub drifted through open windows, laughter mixing with the chill of spring. Inside one semi-detached home, however, the air was thick with shouting. A neighbor would later tell police, "I heard her scream, then him say, 'Stop, Abby, please.' Then, nothing. Seconds later, the sound of breaking glass, a heavy thud, and silence. Upstairs, a little boy froze at the bedroom door as his father crumpled to the floor. His mother, wide-eyed and trembling, whispered, "Please don't die." By the time officers arrived, 22-year-old Bradley Lewis was lying on the kitchen tiles, a deep wound over his heart. His partner, Abigail White, met them at the door. Her hands were trembling, her face wet with tears, her shirt spattered red. "He did it to himself," she said, voice cracking. "He grabbed the knife. I tried to stop him." But the scene told a different story. Blood had been wiped from the floor. A roll of kitchen paper sat soaked on the counter. And in the sink, a gleaming kitchen knife, freshly washed. Paramedics tried everything, but the wound was fatal. Bradley was pronounced dead at 8:45 p.m. At first glance, it could have been what Abigail claimed, an impulsive act during a fight. Yet to the officers, who'd seen hundreds of domestic scenes, something about her behavior felt rehearsed. Detectives sealed off the house. They photographed the living room. Tidy. No signs of forced entry. The only chaos sat inside the kitchen. One overturned chair, a trail of footprints in diluted blood. Abigail, pacing in the hall, kept repeating the same phrase. "He stabbed himself, I swear." Her tone switched between sobbing and defensive. When they asked what happened, she said they'd argued after the pub, that Bradley became angry, and before she knew it, he just did it. But her story changed twice within an hour. First, she said he'd grabbed the knife from the drawer. Then, she said he pulled it from the rack. Later, she added, "I think I might have pushed him when he fell." Outside, police whispered to each other. Every version of her story ended with her trying to help, but none explained the cleaned knife or the bruising on Bradley's neck. And while she was being taken to the station for questioning, officers found something upstairs, a child's pajama top, spattered in tiny drops of blood. A witness had seen the couple arguing at the pub just an hour earlier. Abigail had stormed out, shouting, "You'll regret this, Brad." Now, her partner was dead. To understand that night, detectives had to look back into a relationship built on passion, jealousy, and control. Bradley Lewis was 22, a plasterer by trade, a quiet, hard-working father of 4. Friends described him as the calm in the chaos. He adored his kids, especially his little boy, who clung to him like a shadow. Abigail White was loud, confident, magnetic, the kind of woman who made an entrance everywhere she went. Online, she called herself the fake Barbie of Bristol. Her social media life sparkled with selfies, drinks, expensive lashes, and laughter. But offline, things were darker. Abigail had grown up around chaos, broken relationships, fights, and abandonment. Her temper was legendary even in school. When she met Bradley at 19, he saw her as wild but exciting, a whirlwind of affection and fire. Within months, they moved in together, promising to never be like everyone else. But the honeymoon ended fast. Neighbors often heard shouting. Police were called twice for verbal domestic incidents. Each time, she'd cry and say, "We just love each other too much." That love soon turned violent. By early 2021, the fights had become routine. Jealousy consumed Abigail. Jealousy over his phone, his friends, his coworkers. She'd check his messages, accuse him of cheating, then apologize hours later with tears and promises. Bradley confided in a friend that he was scared of her temper. "She's hit me before," he said. But she always says she didn't mean it. One evening, she stabbed him in the leg during a drunken argument. He never reported it. He told paramedics it was an accident. Still, he stayed, for the children, for hope that things would change. In the meantime, Abigail began earning money on OnlyFans. She liked the attention, the validation, the control. But it drove Bradley mad with insecurity. Friends recall him saying, "I just want the old Abby back." Their love became a cycle. Make up, break up, explode. Every week, someone heard screaming from their home. On social media, though, they smiled for selfies. Captions read, "Forever my king." But hidden in her private messages were threats like, "You make me angry enough to kill you. I'll stab you if you leave." And one voice note recovered later by police. "I know I'm capable of it, Brad. I really am." Everyone who knew them saw it coming. No one imagined it would actually happen. That Friday began like so many others. Good intentions, bad endings. They spent the afternoon at the Deer's Rest pub, joined by friends, drinking, and laughing. At first. But after a few drinks, tension simmered. Witnesses said Abigail grew angry when Bradley spoke to another woman at the bar. She accused him of embarrassing her, called him names loud enough for half the pub to hear. He tried to leave. She followed, shouting. Outside, she slapped him. He didn't hit back. He just walked home. CCTV later showed her stumbling behind him minutes later, barefoot, still yelling. Back at the house, their argument reignited. Bradley told her he wanted space, that he couldn't live like this. She accused him of cheating again. One of their daughters later told police she heard her mother scream, "You won't leave me. You'll never leave me." Then came a heavy thud, a child's cry, and silence. At 8:20 p.m., neighbors saw Abigail pacing outside, phone in hand. She called a friend first, not an ambulance. "Brad's hurt himself," she sobbed. "He's bleeding." Minutes later, she dialed 911, telling operators that Bradley had put the knife in himself. Her tone was oddly calm. When officers arrived, she led them to the kitchen, hands shaking. They asked where the knife was. She pointed to the sink. "I cleaned it because I panicked." One detective later said, "She didn't look shocked. She looked rehearsed." As forensic teams worked through the night, evidence began to dismantle her story. There were no defensive wounds on Bradley's hands, no angle consistent with self-infliction. The knife had gone in deep, straight, precise, through the heart, and upstairs, a child whispered to an officer, Mummy hurt Daddy. By morning, the case that began as a tragedy looked unmistakably like murder. The morning after Bradley's death, detectives returned to the small Kingswood home. The crime scene tape fluttered in the wind, yellow against gray stone. Inside, the air was heavy with bleach and silence. The smell of cleaning chemicals lingered stronger than blood. In the living room sat Abigail White, wrapped in a blanket, mascara streaked, shaking her head as officers entered. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. He did it himself." But investigators had already seen too much to believe that. As the hours passed, Abigail's story kept shifting. At first, she said Bradley stabbed himself. Then, she said they struggled over the knife and it slipped. Later, she claimed she couldn't remember anything at all. Detectives knew this pattern too well: panic, confusion, denial. But Abigail's behavior wasn't panic, it was performance. When they informed her that Bradley had died, she gasped, covered her face, then moments later asked, "Can I go home now?" In the kitchen, crime scene specialists found the evidence she thought she'd erased: traces of blood on the mop, on the handle of the sink, and beneath her fingernails. The cleaned knife still carried microscopic blood fibers on the hilt. Then came the testimony that broke her story apart completely. Bradley's 3-year-old son, in a soft, frightened voice, told a social worker, "Mummy was angry, she pushed Daddy with a knife." Those 7 words were enough. Police arrested Abigail White for suspicion of murder. In the interview room, she kept her arms folded tight, eyes darting around. For hours, she denied it. Then, as evidence piled up, her tone changed. "I didn't mean to stab him," she said quietly. "I just lost it for a second. I loved him." Detectives asked why she washed the knife, why she lied to the operator, why she called her friends before calling for help. "I panicked," she said again. "I thought if they saw the knife, they'd think I killed him." They already did. Later that night, her phone was seized. What investigators found inside made their stomachs turn. Hundreds of messages, voice notes, and screenshots, all proof that this wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a pattern. Text after text filled with rage. "You make me so mad, I'll kill you one day. If I can't have you, no one will. Don't push me, Brad. You know what I'm capable of." And then one voice note just weeks before his death. "One day, you'll see how much damage I can really do." The more they read, the clearer the picture became. Abigail hadn't simply lost control. She had been losing it for months. Detectives reconstructed their lives through phones, CCTV, and witness statements. It told a chilling story. Abigail's jealousy had consumed her. She checked Bradley's location constantly, scrolled through his messages, and accused him of cheating even when he was working late. She'd smashed his phone, broken his car window, and once hit him in front of their children. Friends had begged Bradley to leave. He tried, twice, but always went back, telling his parents, "She'll change. I just want the kids to have both of us." But Abigail didn't want peace. She wanted control. Days before the killing, she'd searched online for stab wounds and how long it takes to die from a heart stab. It was no accident. It was a storm waiting to break. The case reached Bristol Crown Court in May 2023. By then, Abigail was 24. Her hair had gone platinum blonde again, her face carefully made up for the cameras. Reporters called her the OnlyFans killer. The prosecution laid out every detail: the texts, the cleaned knife, the witness testimony from her own child, and the cold, deliberate lie she told to police. They argued that she had full control, that she knew exactly what she was doing. Abigail's defense painted a different picture. Her lawyer described her as a broken woman suffering from borderline personality disorder, traumatized, impulsive, and unstable. They claimed she didn't intend to kill Bradley. She only wanted to scare him. But the jury watched the CCTV from the pub that night. Her anger, her shouting, her threats. Then they heard her voice notes. Her words spoke for themselves. "I'll stab you if you leave me." "I mean it this time." The prosecution's final line echoed through the courtroom. This was not loss of control. This was punishment. When the verdict came, the courtroom fell silent. Guilty. Murder. Abigail White was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 18 years before parole. Bradley's parents wept quietly. They had sat through every day of the trial, hearing the words they already knew were true, that their son's death wasn't an accident. It was a choice. In a statement, his mother said, "Bradley loved her, even after everything she did, but she didn't love him back, not the way she should have." Outside court, a friend whispered to reporters, "He was always trying to fix her. He just didn't realize she was going to break him instead." Their 4 children were placed in the care of relatives. The youngest still asked when Daddy would come home. Abigail's jealousy was never passion, it was power. Bradley's forgiveness was never weakness, it was hope. But hope can be dangerous when it blinds you to the truth. Abigail once bragged online, calling herself Fake Barbie. In the end, that mask defined her, a woman desperate to be seen, even if it meant destroying everything around her. Bradley never got to see his children grow. He never saw justice served. But his story, their story, now stands as a warning about the red flags we ignore until it's too late. She said she loved him, the prosecutor told the jury. But what she really loved was control. If this case moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next true crime story we uncover. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.